My name is Ava Thompson. I am 31 years old, and I'm from Seattle, Washington. What was supposed to be the happiest birthday of my life turned into a public trial, hosted by the two people who raised me. Have you ever walked into your own birthday party and realized you were the target? What would you do if the cake, the candles, the smiling relatives, it was all a setup? Would you stay quiet while your parents list your failures in front of everyone you love? Would you defend yourself? Or would you let them talk and watch who nods along? And what happens when 6 relationships, family, friends, even love, collapse in a single night because someone decided to fix you publicly? Stay with me. Because by midnight, I wasn't the one embarrassed. They were. If you've ever felt something was off but couldn't prove it, that's exactly how that night began. I remember standing outside the restaurant, staring at the warm yellow lights glowing through the windows. It looked beautiful, elegant, thoughtful. My mom had told me weeks ago, this birthday is special. I thought maybe they were finally proud of me. 31, stable job, my own apartment, a life I built without asking them for help. When I walked in, everyone yelled, "Surprise!" The sound echoed too long, forced, rehearsed. There were balloons in my favorite colors, a long decorated table. My favorite chocolate cake sitting in the center like a centerpiece trophy. My dad hugged me tighter than usual. My mom kept smoothing my hair like I was still 12 years old. It should have felt loving, but nobody was really looking at me. You ever notice that? When people avoid eye contact at your own party, my best friend gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My boyfriend squeezed my hand, but it felt like reassurance for him, not me. Conversations stopped when I got close. Laughter faded too quickly, and then it happened. My dad stood up. Now, normally, when someone taps a glass at a birthday dinner, you expect a toast. Maybe an embarrassing childhood story. Maybe a joke about getting older. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "Ava, sweetheart, tonight isn't just about celebrating you, it's about helping you." Helping me, that word hung in the air like smoke. My mom reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. My stomach dropped. "Why would you need notes for a birthday toast?" My dad continued, "We've all gathered here because we love you. And sometimes love means being honest." And that's when I saw it. The circle of chairs behind me, arranged, intentional, like a panel. This wasn't a party, it was a setup. My heart started pounding so loudly I barely heard the next sentence. "We're here for an intervention." Intervention. At my birthday dinner, in front of my friends, my partner, my family. I actually laughed at first. I thought it was a joke, a bad one. I waited for someone to say, "Got you," but nobody laughed. Nobody moved. They were all staring at me like I was fragile, broken. A project, and here's the crazy part, no one asked me how I was feeling. Not one person said, "Are you okay with this?" Instead, my dad gestured for me to sit in the empty chair at the center of the room, like I was about to be evaluated. You ever feel your entire perception shift in a split second? One moment, you're the birthday girl. The next, you're the problem. As I sat down, I scanned the room, counting faces. Looking for anyone who looked uncomfortable enough to stop this. But they were all ready, papers in hand, phones turned off, expressions serious. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't emotional. This was planned. And in that moment, I realized something that hurt more than the word intervention ever could. They didn't invite me to celebrate me. They invited me to fix me. And the worst part, they thought I wouldn't fight back. You ever sit in a room full of people who claim they love you and suddenly feel completely alone? That's what it felt like when my mom unfolded that paper. Her hands weren't shaking. Her voice wasn't emotional. It was calm, controlled, practiced. "Ava," she began, "we're worried about your choices." Choices, not my health, not my happiness, my choices. She started listing them like bullet points in a performance review. My decision to leave the corporate job they bragged about to pursue something unstable. My refusal to move back home when rent got expensive. The men I dated. The fact that I didn't settle down when they thought I should. And then came the real dagger. "You push people away," she said. "You're difficult to love." That one hit deep. You ever hear something that sounds like it's been said about you before, like maybe behind closed doors? That sentence felt rehearsed long before tonight. My dad jumped in next. He talked about concern, about how I was too independent, about how I struggled with authority. Authority, I'm 31, then my aunt chimed in. She said she noticed I overreact to criticism. My cousin added that I seem angry lately. Even my boyfriend cleared his throat and said he sometimes feels like I don't take advice well. Advice or control, that's when it clicked. This wasn't about addiction. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't in danger. I paid my bills, I worked hard, I showed up for people. The only thing I had done wrong was stop living the version of life they designed for me. And the more they talked, the clearer it became, this wasn't love speaking. It was disappointment. Ego. Embarrassment. My career choice embarrassed them because they couldn't explain it at church. My independence threatened them because they couldn't influence it. My boundaries frustrated them because they couldn't cross them anymore. They wrapped it in concern, but underneath, it was control. You ever notice how people call you unstable the moment you stop obeying them? Every accusation had a pattern. Selfish equals not prioritizing their expectations. Reckless equals taking risks they're too scared to take. Emotionally distant equals not oversharing with people who weaponize your vulnerability. And here's what hurt the most. No one asked me why I made those choices. No one asked if I was actually happy. Because if I was happy without their approval, that meant they weren't necessary. That's a hard pill for controlling people to swallow. As they went around the circle, reading their little speeches, I realized something terrifying. They weren't trying to understand me. They were trying to reshape me, to shrink me back into something manageable, predictable, impressively presentable. And the scariest part, they genuinely believed they were right. That's the thing about public interventions that aren't about addiction or danger. They become public humiliations disguised as love. They expected tears, maybe gratitude, maybe a breakdown. What they didn't expect was that I was listening carefully, because while they were listing my flaws, I was identifying their motives. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. This wasn't about saving me. It was about restoring their control. And I hadn't even started speaking yet. You ever realize that the loudest betrayal in the room isn't the person speaking? It's the person staying quiet. After everyone finished their little speeches, something strange happened. No one rushed to hug me. No one said, "We love you no matter what." They just stared at me, waiting, like I was supposed to confess to something. That silence, it was heavy, calculated, almost strategic. I looked around the circle slowly. Not angry, not crying, just observing. My best friend avoided my eyes. She'd known me since college. She'd seen me work 2 jobs. She cried on my couch after her own heartbreaks. And now, she couldn't even look at me. That told me everything. My boyfriend sat stiff, hands clasped, jaw tight. When our eyes met, he gave me that subtle look, you know the one. The "please don't make this worse" look. Not "are you okay?" Not "I'm on your side." Just damage control. My cousin scrolled on her phone like she had already said her part and clocked out emotionally. My aunt crossed her arms, satisfied. My parents sat upright, almost relieved, like they'd finally said what they'd been rehearsing for months. That's when it hit me. This wasn't spontaneous concern. This was coordinated agreement. And silence is agreement without accountability. Because here's the truth, if even one person in that room had said, "This isn't the way to do this," the entire tone would have shifted. If one voice had defended me, questioned the method, or asked for my side before the public critique, the balance of power would have changed. But no one did, and that's what exposed them. Not the accusations, the compliance. You ever watch people nod along to something they know feels wrong, just because it's easier than pushing back? That's what I was seeing in real time. Social pressure is powerful. Nobody wanted to be the dissenter. Nobody wanted to challenge my parents in their own production, because that's what this was, a production, the circle of chairs. The prepared notes, the rehearsed phrases like "we're worried and this comes from love." It was staged for impact, but they underestimated one thing. I wasn't ashamed. I was aware. And awareness is dangerous. The more silent they became, the clearer my thinking got. I realized I wasn't surrounded by enemies, I was surrounded by people afraid to disrupt the narrative. It's easy to speak when you're holding the microphone. It's harder to speak when you risk losing approval. And that's when I started mentally counting. Not just who spoke against me, but who chose safety over truth. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't come from hatred. It comes from convenience. That silence told me who valued comfort over loyalty. Who valued alignment with power over standing by me. Who wanted access to my life but not responsibility for protecting it. And strangely, the silence gave me clarity. It stripped away illusion. These weren't 6 relationships collapsing because of one dramatic night. They had already cracked. This intervention just turned the lights on. And as I sat there in that heavy, suffocating quiet, I made a decision. If they wanted honesty, I was about to give them some. And unlike theirs, mine didn't need rehearsal. You know what's powerful. When everyone expects you to break and you don't. They were waiting for tears. I could see it. Waiting for my voice to shake. Waiting for me to admit I'd been lost and thank them for saving me. Instead, I leaned back in my chair. Calm, that made them nervous. I folded my hands in my lap and said, "Are we done?" My dad blinked. My mom shifted in her seat. Nobody expected a composed response. "I just want to make sure," I continued. "Because if this is about honesty, I have a few things to share too." You could feel the temperature in the room change. You ever notice how people love transparency until it applies to them? I turned to my mom first. "You said I push people away. But when I told you I was struggling last year, you said I was being dramatic. When I asked for support starting my business, you told me to come back when it's successful. That's not me pushing you away, that's me protecting myself." Silence. I turned to my dad. "You said I don't respect authority, but the last 3 times we argued, it was because I disagreed with you, not because I disrespected you. There's a difference." He opened his mouth. Closed it again, then I looked at my boyfriend. "You said I don't take advice well, the advice you're talking about. It was you telling me to take a job I hated because it made you more comfortable explaining my career to your friends." His jaw tightened. And here's where it shifted. "I think what's really happening," I said evenly, "is that I stopped living in a way that makes you all comfortable." Nobody interrupted me now because I wasn't yelling. I was specific. I started pulling out my phone, not dramatically, just calmly scrolling. "Since we're sharing concerns," I said, "let's talk about the financial help you've held over my head for 2 years. The one I paid back with interest. I have the transfers." I held the screen up. My aunt looked at my mom. "Oh, and about me being emotionally unstable. I went to therapy, voluntarily. My therapist suggested I establish boundaries with people who minimize my feelings." That one landed. Hard. You ever see people realize they miscalculated? That's what I saw. Because this intervention wasn't designed for dialogue, it was designed for submission. But I didn't submit. "I'm not addicted. I'm not spiraling. I'm not in danger," I continued. "I'm just different from what you planned." And then I said the part they truly didn't expect. "I forgive you for being scared of who I'm becoming. But I won't shrink to make you feel safe." That's when the power shifted. You could feel it. My cousin looked impressed. My best friend finally met my eyes. My boyfriend looked exposed. Because once the truth is spoken calmly, it's hard to paint it as hysteria. They wanted a confession. What they got was a mirror. And here's the thing about mirrors, not everyone likes what they see. By the time I finished, nobody was leaning forward anymore. They were leaning back. And for the first time that night, I wasn't the one being evaluated. They were. You ever have a moment where everything becomes crystal clear? Not loud, not dramatic, just clear. After I finished speaking, the room didn't explode. There was no screaming match, no dramatic exits. Just silence, but this time it wasn't heavy with judgment, it was heavy with realization. My mom tried to recover first. "Ava, this isn't about attacking us." "No," I said gently. "It's about accountability." That word settled differently. My dad looked tired suddenly, not angry, just exposed, like someone who realized the script had flipped. And then something unexpected happened. My best friend stood up. She didn't defend me. She didn't defend them either. She just said, "I didn't know this was going to be like this." That told me everything I needed to know, because whether she knew or not, she stayed. Silence is a choice. My boyfriend leaned toward me and whispered, "You didn't have to go that far." That's when I felt it, the break, not explosive, not emotional, just final. Because if standing up for myself felt like going too far to him, then we were never standing on the same ground to begin with. "I didn't," I replied quietly. "I just went far enough." One by one, the emotional ties started unraveling. My aunt avoided me entirely. My cousin suddenly had another engagement. My boyfriend stepped outside to get air and never really came back into the circle. And my parents, they looked stunned. Because they thought tonight would end with gratitude. Instead, it ended with distance. I stood up slowly and looked at the untouched cake in the center of the table. 31 candles. All still unlit. That felt symbolic. This wasn't a celebration of my life. It was an attempted correction of it, and I wasn't accepting edits anymore. "I'm not angry," I said finally. "But I'm done being managed." No yelling, no tears, just clarity. And here's the truth nobody talks about: losing people hurts, even when you're right, even when you're justified. Walking toward the door, I felt the weight of 6 relationships shifting behind me. My parents, my boyfriend, my best friend, my aunt, my cousin. 6 connections that looked solid on the surface, but cracked under pressure. But as I reached the exit, something surprising happened. I didn't feel small. I felt light. Because when you lose conditional love, you make room for unconditional peace. That night didn't just end relationships. It exposed which ones were built on image instead of understanding. As I stepped outside into the cool air, my phone buzzed. A message from my boyfriend. "I think we need space." I smiled. "We do," I typed back. And just like that, 6 relationships ended before the cake was ever cut. But here's the twist: it wasn't a loss. It was a reset. Because sometimes your birthday isn't about adding people to your life. Sometimes it's about subtracting the ones who never truly celebrated you to begin with. If this story hit you, even a little pause for a second. Have you ever been the problem in the room just because you refused to be controlled? Have you ever stayed silent to keep peace, even when it cost you self-respect? If you've experienced something like this, I want you to do 3 things right now. First, comment, "I choose clarity," if you've ever had to walk away from people you loved to protect your peace. I read every single comment. Second, like this video if you believe boundaries are not rebellion, they're self-respect. And finally, subscribe and turn on notifications, because these stories aren't just drama. They're reminders that you are not crazy for outgrowing environments that only loved a smaller version of you. Trust me, the next story, it might feel a little too familiar. Eyes.